ecofictologists, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lovis and today I just kind of want to have a little chat with you and then to ask you for some help. I introduced my channel as a place to talk about reading and writing ecofiction, and lately I've been very heavily on the reading part, but with Camp Nano coming up in July, I am now leaning back over to the writing part, and today is somewhere in the middle. I've been thinking about my author brand lately. Let's take a little trip into my mind for a second. My author brand, what do I want to be known for? What do I want readers to expect when they pick up one of my books? And a companion question to that could be, what can I bring to the fantasy table that maybe I don't see very much of, that I would like to see? Or what can I bring my unique experiences and passions to? And then a little light bulb went off. Where are all my fantasy ecologists at? Where are the nerds? Where are the nerds out there taking minuscule measurements to try and figure out how an ecosystem works? How do those things factor into the fate of fantasy world storylines? That is what I want to see. One of my favorite things about fantasy, specifically secondary world fantasy, is the world building. All these crazy plants and animals and these magical creatures that really give you a sense that you are in a different world. I love that because I want to explore it. I want to know how it works. That's what I do. All these worlds with dragons, and you're telling me there are no ecologists out there trying to figure out their reproductive patterns or energy budgets just like we do for lizards and snakes and other reptiles here? And who maybe hate that all those knights are sent to kill their study species? I might write a story about that. That sounds funny. So this video isn't really about me or my story or what I want to write. It's about the role of ecologists in fantasy, and I am begging for some book recommendations. I've started a Goodreads list for this, and I've put some titles on there that I could think of, and some titles that I found on Reddit threads, but I haven't read yet. Please, please, please add to this Goodreads list and help me with my research, because it is slim pickings from my past reading. We have lots of academics, we have lots of magic schools and such, we have lots of scholars, which is great. But I don't see a lot of people going out and exploring the biology of fantasy worlds. And I would love to be wrong about that. So please, please hit me with your recommendations. So now you know what you're in for. Let's get into it. So first of all, let's look at a few examples that I could think of, not only in books, but also in films, because I just reached for anything I could think of, okay? Most notably, perhaps, is the Lady Trent series by Marie Brennan. The first book is called A Natural History of Dragons. This has probably popped into many a mind among my viewers already. It's written as a memoir, and Lady Trent is a naturalist, and she goes on an expedition to find dragons to study them. This is what I want. This is excellent. I am just a little bit into this book. I've just started it, and I'm super excited. I am really excited. I've heard lots of good things, and I'm hoping that this will be a good example for me. It is an interesting skew on ecological fantasy because it is literally fantasy about ecology. And I'm here for it. It tickles all my nerdy tendencies, or it promises to. I don't know that it will yet, but it promises to. Next, I did have to stray into the sci-fi science fantasy realm to find the scientists in Avatar who are studying the Na'vi. Obviously, this is very different because they're studying a society, so they're more anthropologists, really. They're studying language and religion, and they're interacting with, the indigenous culture of this world to which they are visitors and strangers. But I am grasping at straws here, okay? And I'm actually more interested in the role that they play in the plot. So I'm still including them in my list of examples. My third example is Newt Scamander from the Fantastic Beasts series, and here I do want to point out that I am using this from an academic point of view as an example from my research. I'm not trying to advertise or give screen time to JKR. I don't agree with what she said, and I don't want to promote her, but in a very small pool of examples that I could find, Newt Scamander just happens to be a really good one. So I am going to include it, but I am looking at it from a very academic point of view. So those are the examples that I'm working from. So let's see what roles the ecologists play in each of these examples and how the stories are built. In Marie Brennan's A Natural History of Dragons, obviously Lady Trent is the protagonist and she is a naturalist, and the story is it's a memoir about her expeditions to study dragons. Great. In Fantastic Beasts, Newt Scamander is asked for help because of his ecological knowledge of magical creatures, specifically this Obscurial, and he is sucked into a bigger plot about good versus evil, which it always seems to be, and he is our hero, and he is an ecologist, but it's not really an ecological story. It's his knowledge of a certain creature that sucks him into this bigger plot. The scientists in Avatar are there thinking they're there for like a protective purpose and, research. But in the end, of course, they're betrayed and their knowledge is only used to find out where all the resources are and how to subdue the Na'vi. Spoilers for Avatar, sorry. But they aren't really even the protagonist. The protagonist is a military guy that comes and joins their team. So they are a very important side role. So we've got exploration, we've got an ecologist who's sought out for his expertise and then gets sucked into a bigger plot, and we've got the box-ticking scientists whose expertise are then twisted to a completely different purpose. That's a really good start, but why on earth could I only find 3 examples in my arsenal of stories that I have read? And not even read, because 2 of those are films. Is it difficult to center an ecologist in a fantasy story? Okay, I lied. Maybe I will talk about my project a little bit. I've been doing a lot of brainstorming, which you will hear more about next week when I do a little Camp Nano video about it. But I have been trying to outline a story that centers an ecologist in a fantasy world. And I've been running into some difficulties. And this is the part where this video turns into more of a venting of my thoughts to you. So I hope you're comfortable, and if not, get comfortable. This might all be in my head, but in trying to write a fantasy novel that centers an ecologist with a fairly ecological plot, I'm actually finding it really hard to identify high stakes, which is weird because for me, the threat of losing a species to extinction or losing an ecosystem to development and exploitation is super high stakes. That is totally enough for me to feel the urgency in the plot. And I think it works really well in contemporary novels. I mean, just check out my top 10 ecofiction list. Look how many of those top 10 are about this exact thing. And it works brilliantly there, but I don't know if it translates onto an epic fantasy scale. Does that make sense? Like, I feel like the story has to be more like the Newt Scamander example, where you have an ecologist and yeah, maybe the expertise are needed, but the story itself is not actually about ecology, it's about something bigger like good versus evil. Something a bit more epic fantasy. Again, this feels like a very in my head thing because technically epic fantasy just means it's set in a secondary world and doesn't actually have anything to do with the scale of the conflict. But in my head, it does. For me, it does. And I do want to write a story that is enjoyable for a wide readership. I don't want to beat my readers over the head so much with an environmental message that they get so annoyed and put the book down if they're not hardcore environmental message ecofiction fans. Do you know what I mean? Like, I talk about ecofiction being the ninja of science communication because it's sneaky. You can't have this kind of blunt ninja. This is getting very strange. So I don't know how strong the environmental message should be, but that's a whole video in and of itself, so watch this space. I might talk about that. I need to give them a plot that they will like, whether they like environmental messages or not. some kind of hook. Looking at the Avatar example, of course, I can make it super high stakes by looking at the social injustice aspect of resource extraction. And to be honest, that is the direction that I'm leaning, but I want to do that in the most respectful way possible because that is a reality that should not be used for dramatic effect or shock value. So I want to be very careful and respectful about how I represent that struggle in my work. So this is why this is really confusing to me, because in our own world, these topics are on an epic scale. They do affect the entire planet and our, safety and well-being. So why doesn't that translate into a fantasy novel for me? Why can I not make this click? Maybe because that kind of social change, it doesn't feel like that is something that would happen over such a short time period like you would get in a book. And probably not brought about by our protagonist, single ecologist. Maybe I'm being harsh on ecologists, but I always talk about, or I have talked before about, in fields like conservation, the victories that we achieve are not because one person came in and saved the day. It's a culmination of so many little victories and so many people's work that moves everything forward. So to write a book where I have my protagonist be the thing that tips all the scales and changes everything, and if I present this horrible situation to the reader at the beginning of the book, the promise that I'm making is that, don't you worry, by the end of this book, or at least the end of the series, I will have rectified this situation. That's the only way to have the conflict be so gripping that the reader wants to read the entire book or series. It is a promise that I'm making, and if I don't deliver on that promise, they're gonna be unsatisfied. So that leaves me at a bit of a loss, really, because I don't want to fall into this trap of making it seem like it's an easy fix. I wouldn't be able to believe my own story. But maybe that's why there aren't that many novels to choose from. Maybe this is really difficult. And of course, that is the challenge that I have decided to set for myself. I just have to make Ecologists epic. No biggie. Easy. We are epic. I'm gonna show you that we're epic. So this was a bit of a strange video this week, but if you're still watching, good on you and thank you very much. This is what I've been thinking about more than anything else recently, so I thought I'd let you in on the weird and wonderful world that is my mind. Mostly, I would really love some recommendations for you, so if you could please add to the Goodreads list, give me some reading recommendations. I want them all. And if you have any thoughts about this topic, please leave them down in the comments below. I would love to have a discussion about this. And if I have any scientists or ecologists watching this, please let me know what you would like to see in fantasy. What kind of representation of your work would you like to see in fantasy? Because that is super fascinating to me. You can either put all that down in the comments, or you can join our Rewilding Our Stories Discord server and have conversations there. We have ecologists, academics, researchers, readers, publishers, writers, all kinds, and we have a good time and great discussion. So the invite link for that is down below, along with the Facebook group invite, where you can do the exact same thing, and you can reach me there as well. Or if you like what I do and would like to support me, you can head on over to patreon.com/ecofictology and become a patron. Not only do you buy me books, which I love, but you also support Love the Oceans, a marine conservation organization operating out of Mozambique. So I think after that big long ramble, I am done. That's it for today. So I will see you next week, ecofictologists. The Lady Trent series by Marie Brennan. Marie Brennan. The Lady Trent series by Marie Brennan. I cannot say her name.